as Simpson, along with my wonderful co host, Mr. Paul Hoyt, and we're going to welcome you to Curing Racism. This is not a cultural debate and it's not a language argument. This is institutional performance conversation. And today we're examining the simple but costly reality when words are labels of concepts and how they become words of function as trigger words and how they affect your RBR. So, Paul, we
Hey,
got some
good
things to talk about.
and good
Trigger
afternoon.
words.
You used a phrase when you did that introduction that I really liked. Something institutional. What did you say there?
Yes, I said this is institutional performance conversation.
I really like that. I like that idea about labeling our conversations as institutional performance, and that's what it really is. I mean, that's what we're focused on: personal performance, becoming institutional performance, and I am excited about today's topic too, which is the topic of trigger words and one of uh, an out an outreach of something I discovered many years ago, which is called that words are labels on concepts and words are labels on energy, which was the genesis of my personal development program called Mind Sequencing. Just for those of you who haven't heard the story yet, I was sitting being quiet one day and I came across this word, jubilation. And I realized that whenever I said that word to myself, and especially if I said it out loud, it boosted my energy just a little bit. And it really made the connection in between the word that I was thinking and the energy that I was feeling. And I really came to this deep realization that words are labels on concepts. And today we're going to explore how the concepts behind words can change over time and change with situation and change with personalities, sometimes to our benefit and a lot of times to our confusion.
Yes, I think that is very important, right? Words are very powerful. What I tell people in many contexts is to know the true meaning of a word because what happens is a lot of us pick up words and we use words based on someone else's interpretations. And now we may be chanting things we do not desire.
Yeah, and I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. I took a class and read a book in high school on semantics written by Samuel Hayakawa, I believe, who used to be a senator from California. And his basic premise was that words mean different things to different people. That you can take a look at a dictionary, but a dictionary doesn't tell you what the true use of the word is. It tells you what the common use of the word is. So when people say table, they commonly refer to a piece of furniture with, may have three or four legs with a flat surface on the top, or it could mean, an Excel spreadsheet or a part of a Word document. Um, but it's the common use of words that changes over time. Now, some people are really purists and they will say, oh no, that word has to mean this, or this word has to mean something else. But when you hold that opinion and hold that perspective, I think it doesn't serve you well, because you really do have to pay attention to what words mean to other people and in different situations. I'm going to jump right in and talk about something that can be an uncomfortable conversation. That is the N word. The N word, when I was growing up and throughout society, when a white guy used the N word, it was very disparaging. It meant that this person is less than, or this person is unworthy, or this person doesn't really deserve any sort of respect. Whenever we use that, it was always interpreted as a disparaging word. But yet some of my dark chocolate friends use that word when they're referring to each other. And when they use that word in that context, it's more like brother, or it's more like, it's almost in sometimes even a friendly term. So it's
So,
really strange.
so
Talk to
it
me about
goes.
that.
So it goes into the actual meaning of the word, right? So there is the word that is commonly understood as its meaning, which is nigger, Nigger, which means ignorant. Whether it's been attached to black faces, but the word actually means ignorant. But many of us, when we use the word nigger, we use Nigga, but we're actually using it based on the real word negas, where it comes from, which means king, right? So the original meaning of negus meant king, ruler, and it comes from Africa, you
So,
know.
so do you think that all the dark chocolate folks understand that, or are they just kind of picking up on the energy of the word that they hear when other people use it?
I think most of them are picking up on the energy of the
Yeah,
word. I think most of them have decided to reinvent the power behind the word and give it back to negas,
I
which
love it.
means king, right? Where um, most people, and then why it's still not acceptable when it's not said by our by someone who is not black is because you don't serve in the struggle,
Got it.
so you cannot relate to the actual meaning of the word. That would be like, I don't know, um a word that many an Irish man might think is disparaging, when it's said by an Englander, you
Yeah.
know. So there are many different words that are said outside of that ethnic group, would become offensive, but within the ethnic group, it still means love.
I love that. In our conversation today, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about words being labels on concepts and words having energy and words having different meanings was because we were getting some resistance about labeling our workshops as diversity education workshops. There was some pushback by human resource professionals that says, no, you can't even have something that appears to be close to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because those terms have become persona non grata in large corporations. Um, so we've realized that we have to kind of relabel our workshops and relabel our outreach, to call it something else. And words do change meaning over time. But before we jump in and talk about how we want to label our workshops, I want to talk about other words that have changed meaning over time or in different situations. Words like woke. Woke is a classic one. When a word that was originally came out, it meant being awakened to prejudice and discrimination and unfairness in our society. When you said I'm a woke person, what it really meant was I am an awakened person. I am sensitive to the prejudice, the unfairness that's out there. But then it became a disparaging word. These people over here who people were said, you're not a woke person, you're not one of us, immediately began to disparage it, and it has become a word that doesn't have its original meaning at all. Now it means somebody that is, not just who claims to be awakened, but is really cruel to other people and disparaging of other people. And that is, it's always a weird confusion in our society when words change meaning, like woke or sick or dope, or one of my favorite words, love, in different contexts.
Yes, I mean, and then you had simple words that people don't think about, like fat. You know, you used to be like, yeah, that's fat. And if you said that, and I loved. There was a movie that tried to explain what fat meant in our terms. It's like fat doesn't mean fat, FAT. Fat means PHAT, pretty hot and tempting you
Ah,
know. And I was like, I just started to laugh because you know that's not how we saw it, but it actually did relate to how we did see it. So it's always. important, to know the context of words, right? To know the meaning of words, but more importantly, to know the intention of
Yeah,
the word, right?
yeah,
Words become trigger words behind the intention of the words. It is never okay for one of my peach colored brothers to use the N word, but there has been times when it has been slightly acceptable in spaces when they've seen the intention behind the word,
yeah,
right? That hard that when you see that when you hear that right, it's a difference when the N word ends in an A and or ends in an right? And it's a lot more aggressive and offensive when it ends in an right? So it's and again, it's so when we're dealing with our professionals that want to understand how this works, these are performance enhancing tips,
yeah, yeah. I love that.
right? Because it is important for you to understand why your team may not be working cohesively, why they may not be able to collaborate, or more importantly, why they may not be able to understand and relate because they may be not hearing the same word the same way.
Yeah,
Even though
exactly.
it's being said this, even though you all are saying the same things, how we hear them is always so different.
Yeah, always depends upon our background, our experience, our cultural conditioning, etc. Well, so we wanted to talk about this because we did realize that we needed to relabel our curing racism workshop. We're probably not going to change the book itself, Curing Racism, but rather tell people that that was, the beginning of our understanding of the real challenge that our human race, our human species faces these days, which is the challenge of in-group bias. As Paz came up with the other day, the term of subconscious in-group bias reflex, which is another way of saying our tribal instincts, which is another way of saying that we generally speaking, it is our instinct not to trust people who don't look like us, talk like us, think like us, dress like us, or sound like us, etc. So we came up with some new words to relabel the Curing Racism workshops that we want to offer. I came up with a little bit of words, and then we went out and asked our friends at the artificial intelligence engines for lots and lots of ideas. This is what we've come up with, and we want your feedback on it. So now, instead of talking about a Curing Racism workshop, we're offering workshops on teams, tribes, and biases, the psychology of belonging, because that's what it's really about. It's about our need as human beings to belong to groups, to be empowered by, supported by, feel safe by having groups around us. Our teams are immediately families, our tribes, our communities, etc. And how that causes us to be biased towards people who are in our tribes, in our teams, in our communities, and have this subconscious in-group bias reflex when it comes to dealing with people who are not one of us, who are not one of our team, one of our tribe. So we think that that's going to be much more socially acceptable. And we'd love to have your feedback on that, about how you would like to really understand why we humans have this instinct for teams, and tribes, and how that generates this in-group bias and the challenges that brings to our corporations, our communities, and of course to our countries, to our societies, and to the world in general.
I think that's very, very important, as we're talking about how these words come together and how they affect companies, this sense of belonging. Every company, every business, every nonprofit, all started off as a dream, right? We are always enlisting people into our dream. right? So as we are enlisting people into this dream, they have to feel like they belong a part of the dream for the dream to really be successful, for it to be beautiful, right? For it to really work at its most optimum way. And I think as we start building our businesses and as they grow, when we turn that dream into a goal, that goal into that reality, we forget that it started as a dream, right? And this reality that we are building as we enlist more people involved in it, for them to feel like they belong, there's a sense of ownership that comes. And that doesn't always have to be physical ownership, but a part of spiritual, mental, and emotional ownership that they have to be involved in. And curing racism helps because it allows you to see the things that are now that are wearing away the bridges, that are killing and causing cracks in the dams before things start to spill over.
I love that. And for those of you listening to this podcast, if it is your dream, as it is our dream, to have a better place for generations to come, for our children or grandchildren, if you believe in fairness, if you believe that we can become wiser, that we can become kinder to each other, that we can become a society of people who have greater integrity and respect for each other, and forgiveness and acceptance and understanding and all of those things, then we would encourage you to think about the workshops for teams, tribes, and biases. Because when you understand the superficial differences that divide us, we will discover the common values that unite us. And that's what I really want. I want a better, safer world, for my children, for my grandchildren, for your children and your grandchildren and great grandchildren too. And the way that we do that is by exploring human nature and exploring our biases, and really understanding why we think the way that we do, why we feel the way that we do, and what we can do to overcome those biases that have a tendency to separate us.
Paul, as we were uh since our last meeting, I have come up with a better way to understand how we got here.
Good.
Right? So to get to your subconscious bias reflexes, right? Most people are like, oh, what's that? It You had to take a cab to get there, right? And that cab is your common accepted biases. There were so many common accepted biases for so long. An example of that would be slavery, right? It was a common accepted bias. It was accepted, it was actually made the law where they said someone like me was three-fifths of a man, right? That was a common accepted bias. When those common accepted biases were changed and the laws changed, the subconscious did not change for many people, right? And so, since the subconscious did not change, even though the laws have changed, even though the culture had changed, we now develop these subconscious bias reflexes that we then inherently teach our children.
Well
So,
said.
find out what cab you got into that got you to your subconscious bias reflex.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, and as you listen, I encourage everybody who's listening to the podcast to think about the words that they have that have different meanings, words that have changed meaning over time, words that were once acceptable but now are not acceptable at all, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we can just simply relabel things and make them more acceptable, make them much more attractive. That's what we're certainly trying to do. And we appreciate any support that you can give us, any ideas you can give us, any contacts and connections you can give us. of people who might be interested in having stronger teams, about having better performing companies because they understand the danger of in-group biases and the value of overcoming those.
Yes. Companies that want to move at their most optimum rate because they understand that the power of collaboration in their company is important. That the janitor feeling comfortable and being able to provide excellent customer service is just as important as the CEO being able to provide excellent customer service. We provide the bridges.
Amen. That's all I got today, Paz. What, what,
Yes.
what
And we
about
want yes, we want to thank everyone who decided to join us today live and those who'll be watching the replay. Sure that you think about what cab did you get into sure you can get out of that cab and refocus and not have the same conscious bias reflexes. This is Pat Simpson, your co-host from along with my brother Paul Hoyt. Until next Wednesday, make sure that you stay loving, stay caring, because we can cure racism. One conversation, one